No two people see a film the same way. Join me as we examine one of my favorite John Wayne films from a critic's perspective.
After 50 years in the vaults, The High and the Mighty is finally fully restored and ready to be seen by film fans around the world.
I think it's fascinating that a film that's been out of circulation as long as this one has been is still so well remembered. That it's still a film people are eager to see, hungry to see. And it's not just because it is out of reach, you know, the unattainable. It's because they remember it.
I heard you whistling, and I said to myself, only one guy does that just so. I'd know that ugly face of yours anywhere. But you don't remember me, I bet you.
Sure I do, Ben Sneed.
I love the exposition in The High and the Mighty. I love the very opening of the movie as everybody arrives and introduces themselves.
Ben Childs, 53, born Philadelphia.
It's the most obvious exposition you've ever seen in a movie. It draws you in, you have your cast of characters, you understand the conflicts that are going to start to erupt once they're all thrown into this situation on the plane. And you also get to see all these wonderful actors.
Thanks.
This is the kind of movie they used to call an all-star picture. In fact, if you look at the original ads, you'll see a series of headshots side by side. It's not just a John Wayne movie, it's John Wayne and all of these other well-known figures. There are cliches about John Wayne, that he always played the gung-ho hero. You look at the films, you see a broader range than that. And this is a perfect example because he's playing a man who has this terrible heartache in his life, a tragedy that he's trying on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis to live with and overcome. And that's really interesting.
Everything okay, Dan? Yeah, everything's fine. 3,050 aboard.
Robert Stack, who plays the square-jawed pilot here, played this kind of character an awful lot, and even got an Oscar nomination playing one a few years later in a film called Written on the Wind, directed by Douglas Sirk. I think there's something nice about seeing Claire Trevor there because that adds to this sense of continuity that I feel, and I think other fans feel, when they see so many John Wayne movies. You see people you feel comfortable with, and people that you're familiar with, often from other John Wayne movies. Claire Trevor was his co-star in Stagecoach when she was the bigger star. That was the film that made him an A-list star, but she was the more established person at that time. So this was a nice reunion, in a way.
I'm going to go back to San Francisco now. Thank you.
John Quaylen, who plays the fisherman taking his first flight, is somebody who worked in so many John Wayne and John Ford films. I can't begin to count them. He made, I think, literally a couple of hundred movies in his long, long career.
Sure, I forgot.
Paul Fix, who plays the man who's living on borrowed time, was an actor who dated back to the earliest days of talkies. He had stage experience before that. He later gained newfound fame on TV on The Rifleman. You've experienced actors in every part, large or small, from Sidney Blackmer, who's the passenger who's made his money selling some sort of a cure-all that may or may not be accurate, to George Chandler, who's the flight mechanic in the very first scene of the movie who says hello to John Wayne, who went back to the days of Max Sennett, to Regis Toomey, a director like William Wellman, who started out in the 20s, worked with every one of these people before, and he knew they were reliable. He knew they were good. He knew they could deliver.
Yes, sirree. The Waikiki Kids. Just put us down as a float in the Rose Bowl parade.
Phil Harris, who plays the very bombastic fellow who's on a permanent honeymoon with his wife, Anne Duran, was a household name in the 50s. He had been on Jack Benny's radio show maybe more than 15 years at that time.
Somebody's wrong.
There's a small but noticeable part that's played by Carl Schweitzer, who is better known as Alfalfa. And it didn't look very different as a young man than he had as a kid, but that's a face you'll never forget. William Shallard, who plays the dispatcher, was at the beginning of a career that's still going strong, played Patty Duke's father on her TV series back in the 60s. A wonderful, wonderful actor of vast experience. Then, or now, a bestseller is a great pedigree for any movie. You have a pre-sold title that people already know. If they enjoyed the storytelling, they're likely to enjoy the film version of it. Ernest K. Gann was associated with stories to do with aviation in some way or another, but he was a good storyteller too, and he knew how to, plot a film with interesting characters or a book. And in this case, he adapted his own novel. Like every movie, it's a mirror of its time. It's a little miniature time capsule, and that's not intended. They're just making a film for audiences to see, but then looking back from a standpoint of some 50 years, you see how different we were in terms of everything, fashions and attitudes, outlooks. The fact that in the 50s, a little boy would be playing cowboys and Indians and have his holster and his little gun.
Got him, Daddy, got him.
Hollywood was in the midst of great upheaval in the 1950s because television had asserted itself in the late 40s, and by the early 50s, there was no question it was here to stay, and it was becoming a real fixture in American homes. Now, they had to lure people away from their living rooms, where they were getting entertainment for free. So you'll see at the beginning of the film that the biggest letters on the screen, right at the top of the picture, are the ones that spell out the word CinemaScope. It was a selling tool. It was part of what people were going to see, not just John Wayne and all those other stars, but CinemaScope. Remember that because this was an early CinemaScope movie, Wellman couldn't use stock footage from any other movie of planes taking off, landing, flying, skimming through the clouds. He had to shoot them. And so this was all done specifically for this movie, and all the aerial shots are credited to William Clothier, who was a top cameraman, who was a combat cameraman during World War II, and had aviation experience, and then later became one of John Wayne's favorite cameramen. The High and the Mighty got 6 Oscar nominations. It only won 1 Academy Award, and that was for Dimitri Tiomkin's score, a pretty powerful and famous score, though his song with Ned Washington didn't win. It was nominated, it didn't win. But 2 of its actresses were nominated, Jan Sterling and Claire Trevor, and Academy wisdom says sometimes if there's 2 from the same movie, they cancel each other out. Maybe that was the case. And then for film editing, and then for Best Director, William Wellman.
We can only stay in the air another 30 seconds. Full flaps! Full flaps! Now I lay me down to sleep.
This film had a tremendous impact. It was a hit, but besides being a hit, it had a hit song, it had a mystique that has survived all these years. People liked it.
So long, you ancient pelican.